Okay, so welcome to Creekside Book by Book for July 28th, 2021. And today we're going to look at number 6 through 10. So chapter 6 through 10. And we are going, there's a large chunk of this, of chapter 7, that is just the same thing over and over again, like 60 verses. I'm not going to read that, every one of those verses. And then there's another part with a repetitive set of things that happens over and over. And so I'm not going to read those as well. So that's why we're going to go through a good amount of text today. And so we're going to start with just 6:1, looking at the vow of the Nazarite. And so, let's start right there. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazarite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink, and must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins as long as they remain under the Nazarite vow. They must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or skins. During the entire period of their Nazarite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. Throughout the period of their dedication to the Lord, the Nazarite must not go near a dead body. Even if their own father or mother or brother or sister dies, they must not make themselves ceremonially unclean on account of them, because the symbol of their dedication to God is on their head. Throughout the period of their dedication, they are consecrated to the Lord. So the Nazarite vow. This is an interesting place to put this, as the people of Israel are beginning to make their way out of Sinai. The Lord gives this command on vows. And we talked about vows a little bit in Leviticus. If anyone is to make a vow to the Lord, and this is the kind of vow that they could have been referring to, where somebody is just choosing to dedicate themselves to the Lord. And this is something like the priests, only people in the priests who could, or the clans of Levi who could serve in the tabernacle, were men. Priests were the only ones who could do sacrifices. Levites were able to do the work, and we'll talk a little bit about Levites to support the priests. But the Nazarite could be a man or a woman dedicated to the Lord. Probably the most famous Nazarite in the Old Testament is Samson, who is given his parents are commanded to keep him in a Nazarite vow from birth all the way through his life. And that as a special dedication to the Lord, Samson is empowered to be a mighty warrior and strong, and battle with the Philistines. Samson, you know, we read the story of Samson, and he tells Delilah where his strength comes from is, if anybody cuts my hair, then I will be weakened. And it's not the hair that gives him the strength, it's the dedication to the Lord. And the hair is a sign to people around him, that he is dedicated, that he is set apart, and he's living in this vow. And so these people who choose to do this, men, women, rich, poor, from any tribe, they would serve. They would most likely give their time and serve alongside the Levites in some capacity. It could also be a time where they are dedicated to the Lord in a way where they are fasting and praying more fervently. And there is no set time for how long somebody needs to be a Nazarite. It's something that they determine, but they go in and they make a vow and say, like, I'm going to dedicate the next 3 months to the service of the Lord as a Nazarite. And so they let their hair grow for 3 months. And during this time, they can't drink any, really touch anything with and a hint of possible fermentation. And then also they can't touch a dead body. These are the things that, or be near to a dead body, or grieve with a family member's passing. And so these are the things that set them apart. And so why would the Lord tell this right now, as the people of Israel are heading out, getting ready to leave Sinai? And some of the commentators talked about how this is the Lord preparing the people to be representatives to the nations, because they're like, yes, they do have the Levites as the main priestly clan or tribe, but they also, the people were called to be a nation of priests. They were all supposed to be in this way, and so the Nazarites are given this opportunity to um, demonstrate their dedication to the Lord. So what happens though if something breaks the Nazarite's vow? Verse 9, in particular, they touch a dead body or something. If someone dies suddenly in Nazarite's presence, thus defiling the hair that symbolizes their dedication, they must shave their head on the seventh day. The pigeon of the seventh day of their cleansing. Then on the eighth day, they must bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to offer one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering to make atonement for the Nazarite, because they sinned by being in the presence of the dead body. That same day, they are to consecrate their head. Again, they must rededicate themselves to the Lord for the same period of dedication and must bring a year-old lamb as a guilt offering. The previous days do not count because they became defiled during the period of dedication. And so if they are to be in close contact to a dead body, in proximity to a dead body, in presence of a dead body, they have to basically start over. And they're starting over, like they're bringing these sacrifices that we talked about in Leviticus as ways of purifying themselves, a sin offering and a guilt offering. And these are part of the reset. And so they shave their head, they restart their vow to the Lord, and the time that they promised in the first place would happen again, all over. And so the Levite would be, or the Nazarite would be very careful during their vow to observe these things. But sometimes things just happen. And, part of the reason why like this reset is important is because it would keep people from entering into vows without really being fully committed to the vow. And so knowing that if they messed it up somehow, they'd have to start over, then they wouldn't just like be like, yeah, I'm going to do this vow. It's like Lent. I'm going to give up chocolate for Lent. And then like 2 weeks in, like, I love chocolate. It's over. That's not how the Nazarites would view their vows. They would look at this as a time of intense dedication to the Lord. So let's say their time is up. Their term is fulfilled. Verse 13 explains that. Now, this is the law of the Nazarite. When the period of their dedication is over, they are to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting. There they are to present their offering to the Lord, a year-old lamb without defect for a burnt offering, a year-old ewe lamb without defect for a sin offering, a ram without defect for a fellowship offering, together with the grain offering and drink offerings, and a basket of bread made with the finest flour and without yeast, thick loaves with olive oil mixed in, and thin loaves brushed with olive oil. The priest is to present all these before the Lord and make the sin offering and the burnt offering. He is to present to the basket of unleavened bread and is to sacrifice the ram as a fellowship offering to the Lord, together with its grain offering and drink offering. Then at the entrance to the tent of meeting, the Nazarite must shave off the hair that symbolizes their dedication. They are to take the hair and put it in the fire that is under the sacrifice of the fellowship offering. After the Nazarite has shaved off the hair that symbolizes their dedication, the priest is to place in their hands a boiled shoulder of the ram and 1 thick loaf of 1 thin loaf from the basket, both made without yeast. The priest shall then wave these before the Lord as a wave offering. They are holy and belong to the priest, together with the breast that was waved and the thigh that was presented. After that, the Nazarite may drink wine. This is the law of the Nazarite who vows offerings to the Lord. Who vows offerings to the Lord in accordance with their dedication. In addition to whatever else they can afford, they must fulfill the vows they have made according to the law of the Nazarite. So at the conclusion, they bring these offerings, and they also cut and burn the hair. And so while we are, we've gone over a lot of these different sacrifices in the past, and these guilt offerings, these wave offerings. So this is all part of the reintroduction into normal life for a person of Israel. And so they are essentially doing the work that people would normally do in their normal worship of the Lord, and saying, I am stepping out of this season of dedication and stepping back into my normal practice. And so this, though, they're in their peace offering that they're giving, they are giving more than they normally would. And so this is a just one more indication that this was an extra special time of consecration to the Lord. And so it is not, the Nazarite vow is not something that is required for everybody to do. It is something that people, when they maybe feel the Spirit of God calling them to do that, that's what they would do. So Samson was a Nazarite. Samuel was most likely a Nazarite. There's a passage in the book of Acts where Paul goes and shaves his head because he has fulfilled a vow. Paul, a follower of Jesus, probably could have been partaking in a Nazarite vow as a way of taking time to dedicate to the Lord. And so that's something that, it's followers of Jesus. Like, we can't do all of the sacrifices and stuff that are here, but like, if there's a time to practice dedication to the Lord, like, that is something that we can do. And it's something that the Lord would honor as we are trusting him with that vow. So in verse 6:22, we see a passage that we're pretty familiar with at Creekside. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you are to bless the Israelites. Say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. So they will put my name on the Israelites, and I will bless them." So this high priestly blessing is essentially whenever the priest is releasing somebody from the tabernacle back into their normal life. So as a Nazarite, like, the Lord is, or the high priest is putting this blessing on the Nazarite when their vow is completed, saying, "The Lord bless you and keep you." But it could also be when some at the end of the meetings at the tabernacle or the teaching times, the high priest was to put the blessing of the Lord on them. And so these specific things to bless you and keep you is to provide for you and protect you, make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Like, the light of Christ is, or the light of the Lord is on you when he's looking on you. May he turn his face towards you and give you peace. And one of the ways to translate that, and this is how I say it on Sunday, is may the Lord smile upon you and bring you peace. And that is kind of the sense in the Hebrew is of a look of joy. Turn his face toward you, to be joyful that you are here. And so when the Lord is smiling on us, we can receive that peace. And one of the things, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I keep my fingers kind of separated when I do the blessing at the end, because that is what the high priest would have done. They would have done the, I don't go full on Spock because I just think that would probably be weird a lot of people out. But the high priest would have separated their fingers in this way as a blessing as the people go out. And it is, it is like Spock, because Leonard Nimoy, who was Jewish, he just took it right from his rabbi and said, "This is what Spock's going to do: live long and prosper." And so, so this blessing is something that, as Christians, like, we want to walk in the blessing of the Lord, and it's not something that the priest is doing. The priest is making a promise and a declaration that the Lord will protect and bless the people, and so this blessing that is, he's giving this as the people, again, are getting ready to leave, go to Sinai. And so, the walking in the blessing of the Lord is an important part of this whole experience. And so the fact that it is written in kind of a poetic rhythm also is helpful to memory. And so, it's a good practice to walk in. And then verse 7, they talk a little bit more about the tabernacle. When Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it, all its furnishings. He also anointed and consecrated the altar and its utensils. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of families, who were the tribal leaders in charge of all those of those who were counted made offerings. They brought as their gifts before the Lord 6 covered carts and 12 oxen, an ox from each leader and a cart from every two. These two they presented to the Lord before the tabernacle. The Lord said to Moses, accept from these from them, that they may be used in the work at the tent of meeting. Give them to the Levites as each man's work requires. So Moses took the carts and oxen and gave them to the Levites. He gave 2 carts and 4 oxen to the Gershonites as their work required, and he gave 4 carts and 8 oxen to the Merarites as their work required. They were all under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron, the priest, but Moses did not give any of the to the Kohathites, because they were to carry on their shoulders the holy things for which they were responsible. When the altar was anointed, the leaders brought their offerings for its dedication and presented them before the altar. For the Lord had said to Moses, each day one leader is to bring his offering at the dedication of the altar. All right, so they are doing the tabernacle setup. Everything's being dedicated. Everything's being anointed and prepared, and they're getting ready to leave. And then it's like, well, we need things that to help us get out. And so they're going to need these carts in particular. And so the Gershonites and the Merarites, they get carts for all of the parts of the tabernacle that they're responsible for. But the Kohathites, who are carrying the lampstand, they're carrying the table of the presence, they're carrying the ark. Those all have poles on them to keep them from being handled by just anybody, and so they're not put on a cart. And so that's why they weren't given any carts. And so then the tribal leaders are the ones who bring and bless the Levites with all of these things. And then verses 12 through 83 basically just repeats the same thing, the gifts, because they give the exact same gifts. Every tribe leader gives the exact same gifts for 12 days. And so it's interesting that it's one a day for 12 days. That would have left 2 Sabbath days where no work was being done. And every tribe other than the Levites would have had an opportunity to bring an offering and a blessing to the Levites to do their work. And so the verses 84 continues talking through all of the different oxen and everything and adds it all up. And so it was 12 silver plates, 12 silver sprinkling bowls, 12 gold dishes. And so they all weighed a certain amount. And then also we had total number of animals for the burnt offerings came to 12 young bulls, 12 rams, 12 male lambs, and their grain offerings, 12 male goats were used for the sin offering. The total number of animals for the sacrifice for the fellowship offering came to 24 oxen, 60 rams, 60 male goats, and 60 male lambs a year old. These were the offerings for the dedication of the altar after it was anointed. When Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the 2 cherubim above the atonement cover on the ark of the covenant law. In this way, the Lord spoke to him. So this verse 89 is telling us 2 things. One, how the Lord spoke to Moses and when the Lord spoke to Moses was in the tabernacle, but also this is a sign, a indication to us that the Lord was pleased and accepted these gifts and offerings for the dedication of the altar and all the tabernacle elements. And so the Lord is speaking to Moses, and there's a continuing presence in the most holy place. So that chapter 7 is super repetitive, but I mean, it's just showing how meticulous they are as they are walking through the commands of God. Like the book is called Numbers for a reason, because they're paying attention to the numbers. They're paying attention to what's happening. And as they are doing all of these things, like they're bringing their treasures, their valuables, their livestock, which is their livelihood. They're bringing all of this to the Lord as an offering to worship and honor Him. And so, so they're keeping good records of this. Chapter 8 then says, the Lord said to Moses, speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the lamp, see all 7 light up the area in front of the lampstand. Aaron did so. He set up the lamps so that they faced forward on the lampstand, just as the Lord commanded Moses. This is how the lampstand was made. It was made of hammered gold from its base to its blossoms. The lampstand was made exactly like the pattern the Lord had shown Moses. And so this seems almost like an aside, but we're talking about all of the preparation and moving and then setting things back up. And one of the important things for setting back up when the camp finds a place is to ensure that the menorah, the lampstand, is properly lighting the area that it's set in. And the way the light is directed, like the lampstand is a sign of the presence of God shining down on the table of showbread, which on the table of showbread, there are 12 loaves representing the tribes of Israel. And so the light of God is shining on the 12 tribes. Now back up to the high priestly blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord turn his face towards you, being gracious to you. May the Lord smile upon you and give you peace. And this is the light of God shining on the lampstands. And so so there's a little bit of an echo back to that high priestly blessing. This is what the priest's job is essentially mediating for the people in worship and sacrifice as a way to help the people walk in the light of God. And so that short little thing, Aaron does exactly what he's told. So the Aaron and his sons have been consecrated and dedicated, and their family is ready for service in the tabernacle. But then there's the rest of the Levites who have not been dedicated, and that's what this next section is all about, because the Levites are going to do a lot of the work of supporting the tabernacle, moving it and tearing it, breaking it down, setting it back up. And so they need to be consecrated. And so that's what is happening in this next section, starting in verse 5. The Lord said to Moses, take the Levites from among all the Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. To purify them, do this: sprinkle the water of cleansing on them, then have them shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes, and so they will purify themselves. Have them take a young bull with its grain offering of the finest flour mixed with olive oil. Then you are to take a second young bull for a sin offering. Bring the Levites to the front of the tent of meeting and assemble the whole Israelite community. You are to bring the Levites before the Lord, and the Israelites are to lay their hands on them. Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the Israelites, so that they may be ready to do the work of the Lord. Then the Levites are to lay their hands on the heads of the bulls, using one for a sin offering to the Lord and the other for a burnt offering, to make atonement for the Levites. Have the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons, and then present them as a wave offering to the Lord. In this way, you are to set the Levites apart from the other Israelites, and the Levites will be mine. After you have purified the Levites and presented them as a wave offering, they are to come do their work at the tent of meeting. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to me. I have taken them as my own in place of the firstborn, the first male offspring from every Israelite woman. Every firstborn male in Israel, whether human or animal, is mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set them apart for myself. And I have taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn sons in Israel. From among all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as gifts to Aaron and his sons to do the work at the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites and to make atonement for them, so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community did with the Levites, just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes. Then Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord and made atonement for them to purify them. After that, the Levites came to do their work at the tent of meeting under the supervision of Aaron and his sons. They did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Lord said to Moses, this applies to the Levites: men 25 years old or more shall come and take part in the work at the tent of meeting. But at age 50, they must retire from their regular service and work no longer. They may assist their brothers in performing their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves must not do the work. This then is how you are to assign the responsibilities of the Levites. All right, so the Levites and the priests, Aaron's clan, Aaron's family, they had all of this elaborate sacrifice, 7 days of isolation, all of these different elements. The Levites are just cleansed, and they shave their bodies to remove any kind of impurity that could possibly be on them. And then they have these two bulls, and one is a sin offering, and the other is a burnt offering. And so the people lay their hands on the Levites, and what's most likely happening here is the people are being represented by their clan leaders, which have been doing a lot of the work of bringing the offerings and that kind of stuff. So the clan leaders would lay their hands on the Israelites as representatives, because as the Lord says here, the Levites are standing for every firstborn male from the rest of Israel, and so they're gods. They belong to God, not they are lowercase g gods, but they are God's possession. And so he has set them aside, and so they're going to do this work as the assisting in the tabernacle. Then also an interesting thing, like Aaron is to present the Levites as a wave offering, and with a wave offering, the priest would lift up the thing that's being waved and wave it around. And so this is a symbolic wave offering. Aaron did not pick up all the Levites and wave them around. And so he's essentially saying, Lord, these are yours. We thank you for these people, these men who are going to serve in your tent of meeting. And so they laid their hands on the Levites, and then the Levites laid their hands on the bulls. As we see in the sacrificial system, the laying hands on an animal is like as a representative. You're transferring yourself, your sinfulness, your impurity onto the sin offering, and then so that bull is taking your place essentially. So so this is the Levites getting ready to do the work at the tabernacle, because the tabernacle is about to get moving, and so they need to be consecrated to be able to do the work. Otherwise, they would be bringing judgment on themselves. So let me see here. The Levites. One more note here. The age of 50, the Levites are required to retire from active service in the tabernacle. They can assist, but they are no longer going to be the main workers. And 50 years old, 50 years old was a long life, and at this time, and they're living in the wilderness, they would have been worn down. And so the mandatory retirement of the Levites ensures that they're not overworking their elders, but also it makes sure that they're training the next generation, because they have a time limit and when they can serve as Levites. And so they have to be, replicating and making sure that there's enough Levites who know how to do the work. But thinking about the work that the Levites do, there's a lot of breaking down, a lot of lifting. And so, you can only do that for so long with the human body. So verse 9 then, because we're still not leaving Sinai yet, but we're getting closer. The Lord spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they came out of Egypt. He said, have the Israelites celebrate the Passover at the appointed time. Celebrate it at the appointed time at twilight on the 14th day of this month, in accordance with the rules and regulations. So Moses told the Israelites to celebrate the Passover, and they did so in the desert of Sinai at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. The Israelites did everything just as the Lord commanded Moses. So we are 1 year out from the Exodus event. This is the second Passover. And so the people are at Sinai, and they've done the lamb liturgy. They've put the blood on their tent posts somehow. So they're doing all of the bitter herbs, all the different things that are part of the Passover. And so this is great. Passover, for the second Passover, first Passover in the wilderness. Verse 6, but some of them could not celebrate on that day because they were ceremonially unclean on account of a dead body. So they came to Moses and Aaron that same day and said to Moses, "We have become unclean because of a dead body, but why should we be kept from presenting the Lord's offering with the other Israelites at the appointed time?" Moses answered them, "Wait until I find out what the Lord commands concerning you." And so the people want to worship God. They want to observe the Passover, but because like a family member died in their tent, right? And so now like they can't offer sacrifices because they cannot be cleansed in time for the Passover. And so like their question here is like, can you just give us like a hall pass on this? Like we're good for this Passover? But they want to do the Passover. They want to remember how the Lord has rescued them from slavery. And so Moses doesn't just make something up, but he says, "I will go and ask the Lord to see what he says." And so probably went into the tent of meeting, and in between the cherubim, somehow the Lord was speaking to Moses from from there. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, when any of you or your descendants are unclean because of a dead body or are away on a journey, they are still to celebrate the Lord's Passover, but they are to do it on the 14th day of the second month at twilight. They are to eat the lamb together with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They must not leave any of it until morning or break any of its bones. When they celebrate the Passover, they must follow all the regulations. But if anyone who is ceremonially clean and not on a journey fails to celebrate the Passover, they must be cut off from their people for not presenting the Lord's offerings at the appointed time. They will bear the consequences of their sin. A foreigner residing among you is also to celebrate the Lord's Passover in accordance with the rules and regulations. You must have the same regulations for both the foreigner and the native born." So the Lord gives an act of grace here and extends the time for somebody who is ceremonially unclean at the Passover or traveling on a journey, but they have to come back within the next month to do the Passover. And so this is a very gracious thing that the Lord allows in this in these situations. And so they would probably have to like declare themselves to the priest in some way, like, we are unclean, we cannot be there, or before they go on their trip, like, this, I have to do this, but I won't be back in time for the Passover. So they have to declare themselves, and then they are able to do that when they return or are made clean. But anybody who's just like, nah, I'm not gonna do Passover this year, are essentially cut off, removed from community. There could being cut off is, extreme sense could be like execution, or just kicked out of the community, shunned in such a way where they are outside of the blessing of God. And so, the Lord takes his festivals seriously, and he wants his people to do the festivals because the festivals remind the people of God's saving work. And so the same reason why communion is a part of the church, it helps us remember God's saving work. Why we do baptism, it helps us remember God's saving work. These are parts of, for the Christian tradition, these festivals are ways that we can remember what God has done. But even, observing Good Friday, celebrating Easter, celebrating Christmas, at heart, it is about remembering God's work. The Christian calendar throughout the year, different churches have different traditions around it, but we don't want to just look at the Old Testament and the Jewish festivals and say, well, you don't have to do that anymore, because we have made we have created our own holy days as well. And so we can remember these holy days in the Old Testament and say, these are good and these are edifying. But we also need to recognize that we have our own holy days, and we should take time to remember those things. So Christmas, Good Friday, Easter, Pentecost, those are the big ones, I guess. And I was thinking of one more. But there's a ton of feast days all throughout the year that we could take some time. Annunciation, and then dedication of Jesus. These are all different things that we could hold on to as our own kinds of festivals as well. So, all right, verse 15 of chapter 9. On the day the tabernacle, the tent of covenant law, was set up, the cloud covered it. So the presence of God is resting over the tabernacle. From evening till morning, the cloud covered the tabernacle, looked like fire. That is how it continued to be. The cloud covered it, and at night it looked like fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Wherever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. As at the Lord's command, the Israelites set out, and at his command, they encamped. As long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, they remained in camp. When the cloud remained over the tabernacle a long time, the Israelites obeyed the Lord's order and did not set out. Sometimes the cloud was over the tabernacle only a few days. At the Lord's command, they would encamp, and then at its command, they would set out. Sometimes the cloud stayed over only from evening till morning, and when it lifted in the morning, they set out. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud lifted, they set out. Whenever the cloud stayed over the tabernacle for a day or a month or a year, the Israelites would remain in camp and not set out. But when it lifted, they would set out. At the Lord's command, they encamped. At the Lord's command, they set out. They obeyed the Lord's order in accordance with his command through Moses. So following the cloud is the first indication of when the people are to move and stop. And so daytime, it's a pillar of cloud. Nighttime, it's a pillar of fire. And so even at night, the presence of God is there with the people and is bright. It's a pillar of fire in the middle of your camp, which I find very interesting. They did not have a lot of people in these early days coming and attacking their tents because they had a pillar of fire at night. That would be pretty intimidating if you think about it. But they were doing all of these things to honor the Lord, to trust the Lord, and follow his direction instead of setting out on their own. And this is what the first order of direction was going to be from, is the Lord's, the cloud and the cloud movement. The second, though, is the silver trumpets. Chapter 10, verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, make 2 trumpets of hammered silver and use them for calling the community together and for having the camp set out. When both are sounded, the whole community is to assemble before you at the entrance to the tent of meeting. If only one is sounded, the leaders, the heads of the clans of Israel, are to assemble before you. When a trumpet blast is sounded, the tribes camping on the east are set out. At the sounding of a second blast, the camps on the south are to set out. The blast will be the signal for setting out. To gather the assembly, blow the trumpets, but not with the signal for setting out. The son of Aaron, the priests, are to blow the trumpets. This will be a lasting ordinance for you and the generations to come. When you go into battle in your own land against the enemy who is oppressing you, sound a blast of the trumpet. Then you will be remembered by the Lord your God and rescued from your enemies. Also, at your times of rejoicing, your appointed festivals, your new moon feasts, you are to sound trumpets over your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and they will be a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. All right, so first sign that they're supposed to move is the pillar of cloud moving. The second sign is a way of organizing the camp. These silver horns, trumpets, they are not like a shofar. They are metal horns, like a bugle. And so they are used to communicate, when do we gather together? What time? And like, you come to the tabernacle now, as well as communicate which section of the camp is to move first. And so it starts east and works its way around from east, south, west, north, and they work their way to to follow after the cloud. And so this is just a way of giving organization to the people. And so it's not that they are not trusting the Lord when to move, but God is a God of order. And so he's like, I'm trying to move like a couple million people in the wilderness. I'm going to need you guys to help with the logistics on this. And so that's what the temple or the trumpets are for. And then verse 11, on the 20th day of the second month of the second year, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle of the covenant law. Then the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai and traveled from place to place until the cloud came to rest on the desert of Paran. they set out the first time at the Lord's command through Moses. So we're moving. We're leaving Sinai. We're on the way. And so they would have seen the pillar of cloud moving, and then they would have started blowing the trumpets, communicating, we have to go follow the cloud. And so they, the next section, 14 through 27, is giving just the way they went and who's in charge and who's leading the tribes as they work around the camp to leave. And then verse 29 says, now Moses said to Hobab, son of Ruel, at the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out for the place about which the Lord said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel. He answered, no, I will not go. I am going back to my own land and my own people. But Moses said, please do not leave us. You know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can be our eyes. If you come with us, we will share with you whatever good things the Lord gives us. So they set out from the mountain of the Lord, traveled for 3 days. The ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them during these 3 days to find them a place of rest. The cloud of the Lord was over them by day, and when they set out from the camp. Whenever the ark set out, Moses said, rise up, Lord. May your enemies be scattered. May your foes flee before you. Whenever it came to rest, he said, return, Lord, to the countless thousands in Israel. And so that's the last part of our section. And so so we've got the cloud guiding and directing. We have the trumpets communicating, helping people on the move. And then Moses invites Hobab, son of Ruel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law. And so there's a couple different interesting things going on with this person. It could be that Jethro is also named Hobab, because Hobab is Moses' father-in-law, or Ruel, the Midianite, is also named Jethro, and Ruel then is Hobab's father, so Hobab would be Moses's brother-in-law. So there are just who is this person? Like, that's kind of the question. And so somehow this relative of Moses through marriage is kind of where we're landing. Relative of Moses through marriage has been with them, and he's leaving. And Moses says, stay with us. You know the land, you know the territory. And so there's now 3 levels of potential help with the camp. When to go with the cloud, and where to go with the cloud. Who's leaving when with the trumpets. And then when they get there, they're trusting that the Lord will provide for them, but Hobab knows the terrain. He knows what is in those areas, and he knows how to help the camp survive day to day. And so that's why Moses is like, I would love for you to stay with us. We'll treat you well. We'll take care of you. This will just be a mutual benefit. And he doesn't give us an affirmative here after Moses' second request. But it seems like that, because he didn't say no again, that he accepted the invitation to stay with the people. And so they leave Sinai. They're on the way, and they travel 3 days to Hadan Paran. And I love the way Moses prays as they're getting ready to go. Rise up, Lord. May your enemies be scattered. May your foes flee before you. And so as the Lord is sending out, he's asking that the Lord would do the work of driving out anybody who would be hostile to the people of Israel. And then when they find the place to settle and the cloud settles over the tent, return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel. We welcome you back. We want you to dwell and be with us. And so, so we are seeing now they're out on the way. Next week, we will see how they react to their first encounter as they get close to the land God promised. And spoiler, it does not go well. So, any questions on number 6 through 10? Any questions? All right, I'm just looking at the chat. And Jeff, yeah, cool. Casey treats kids have tattoos. All right. Yeah. A lot of people have tattoos. Kathy and I thought about getting tattoos. We have not, because just I don't know. It just doesn't sound fun. And yeah, and no matter what, if you have Jesus, we will be with God for eternity. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. Any questions though on numbers 6 through 10?
I had a question.
Yes.
I was just really curious, especially on that last part about like the moving and like the cloud and the trumpets and all that stuff. But like were they like ready to go at a moment's notice? Like did they like not fully unpack? Because moving is like a big old process. And I mean, I know they didn't have like, they weren't, in houses like we are, like they were moving in tents and things like that. They had stuff that was portable, but it just feels like such a giant undertaking. And then to be ready to go, like whether it's a night or a year, like, like to be so settled or not, I don't know. Just, do you have any like, did you read anything up on that sort of like their process or anything like that?
No. No, they didn't have a packing guide for the people of Israel.
Yeah.
But you're right. It would be like if they're there for months, which it says like they could have been there for a long time or a year, like they would have settled in.
Yeah.
And so like that command to move, like they must have always just been kind of ready, which is part of the nomadic lifestyle, like living simply, and being able to use their cattle and all of those different animals that were with them as pack animals. Like they had systems for all of these kinds of things as nomads, and like their heritage is from Abraham is as nomads. Abraham wandered around the land for a long time, and so it's probably some kind of skill set that was passed on generation to generation to be able to go, even though they were not able to go anywhere for 400 years in Egypt. But there is probably some kind of just cultural awareness or cultural skill set that they're still holding on to. So, yeah, but it would be a major pain in the butt. Like, so, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know how fast the cloud moves. Like, I don't know if they see the cloud just start lifting up in the morning. They're like, oh, guys, today's the day. Pack it up. So, but they never got lost, so like they seem to always make it.
Yeah.
So.
Good. Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense though. Like if that is your lifestyle, like and your cultural lifestyle, that it would be something you're used to. Whereas like our lifestyle, like, well, I mean, mine isn't like that. So yeah, that.
Yeah. Well, I have like, I'm doing this remodel in my home office, and like all my books are boxed up, which, I probably was, most people say, Jason, you have too many books, and don't look at this. Don't look. Because these are not all my books. But like if I had to move like in a day, my heart would break. Like I'm going to have to just leave all these books. I'm not going to be able to move them all. But they didn't have things like books. They didn't have a TV. They got to figure out and call the cable company. And like, I got to change my service. Like, they didn't have all this stuff that we have. So, yeah, but it would have still been not easy. So, and it's like 2 million people moving from one place to another. And so, like it says, it's a 3-day journey to Haden Paran, and that's probably 3 days, like quick. Like the tent the tent and like the Levites and the cloud probably rested there, and they had to catch up to the cloud, right? And so it was a long walk for a lot of people. So I heard somebody talking and I cut them off. I'm sorry.
I know, I was just saying that's a lot of people, like logistically, to move at one time. So
yeah, and that's why the trumpets are so important. Is like you pay attention to the signals and follow the signals. So like not all of them are like I want to be in front. Like no, you don't get to be in front. Like,
yeah,
you're third or your whole group is fourth. And then even in the camp, like having a peel out schedule for all the different tents and the families and clans. So a lot of work.
I got a question.
Yes.
For the Aaronic blessing, since it was originally for the Israelites, how did it get carried over to be a blessing for us? Because we're not Israelites.
Yeah. It's, I think my theory, because I don't really know or why Christians do it, is just because it's a blessing from the Bible. And, when we dismiss people, it's a good reminder that we want to go out in the presence of the Lord and carry and like let the Lord lead our everyday life. And so, so while we're not Jewish and I'm not a high priest, it's still a truth from Scripture that we want to hold on to as God's people in the body of Christ.
I have to say, I kind of like the latter one too. Rise up, Lord, may your enemies scattered. I want to say that at the end of Sunday.
Yeah. Well, no promises, Carrie.
I know. The warrior in me.
Yeah, but it's not. If you've been watching The Chosen, and I've probably talked about this a bunch of times to a bunch of different people, but one of the things that's interesting in The Chosen is the different times of prayer throughout the day and the prayers that the disciples pray. So they pray over their meals. They have a specific prayer. Then when they wake up, they have a specific prayer. And this is one of those passages that like would not be a bad thing to pray every day. As you are getting started, Lord, like rise up, Lord, may your enemies be scattered, may your foes flee before you. And so now you are following the Lord in that prayer. And then when you go to bed, return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel. Like now we are coming down to rest. And so, Lord, I ask your presence even now to be with me as we are resting. So like it wouldn't be bad to just have this as a everyday kind of prayer for your own life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just love Moses's attitude here is like, we're finally going, rise up, Lord. So
is the showbread the same as the bread of presence?
Yes.
Yeah. Like when in The Chosen, remember when David busts into there and give me that bread, and he's like, this is the bread of presence. I love how he has to explain to the young man about laying with the wife. He's like, we get yada yada yada, and he's like, well, what's that? And he goes, well, I'll explain that to you later.
Yeah. The Chosen does a really good job of highlighting some of these things that were a part of the people of Israel in a way that is educating like Christians. Like if you already know, it's like, oh, that's super interesting. And then it's enough to be like, what is that? Like, what are they doing? But they actually explain it. Like the priest it was explaining it to the young kid, like each one of these is for one of the tribes. And so he's saying the names of the tribes as he's putting them in the piles and all that stuff. Like it's such a good show, guys.
I'm with him on that. Watch it. It's really good. I am still totally suckered into that thing.
Yeah. So you can download a app on your phone and watch it on the phone for free. So anyway, no more plugs. All right. Any other questions?
Oh, no, not question, but getting back to that one. When David busts into the thing and the portion that he says, I didn't know where it was in the Bible, and I was reading it today. It's in Samuel, 1 Samuel 20 something.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, that's the portion that when David busts in there and he's saying, well, why are you not protected? At first, I didn't know who this guy was. I was like, who is this person? What do you mean he's not protected? And he says, I'm on a mission from the king. He says, I don't think you and king are on friendly terms.
Yeah.
And then, he says, no, the king. So I finally found that part. It was impressive.
Yeah. It's the life of David is fascinating, and so we're going to talk a lot about David in the coming weeks. But yeah, so I'm glad you found it and to read it in Scripture. So they do a good job of not like fully portraying it, but like creating a sense of urgency in David there, because he's actually running from Saul at that point. So yeah. All right. Any other questions on Numbers 6 through 10? These are all good questions, by the way, Carrie. So
I kind of see an association. I don't understand why God chooses number 12, but we have the 12 tribes, the 12 disciples, and then you jump fast forward the 12 days of Christmas.
yeah, well, God didn't choose the 12 days of Christmas.
No, I know.
That's a tradition that just kind of happened. But there are 12 days of Christmas between Christmas Eve to Epiphany. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long day. So those 12 days between Christmas Eve to Epiphany, that is the 12 days of Christmas. So Christmas Eve is actually the first day of Christmas. And then Christmas tide goes on to Epiphany. And then the next feast day after that is the Feast of Fools, and which is a super fun day. Yeah, we don't do that in most Protestant traditions, but so those traditions, like the 12 days, like 12 tribes, 12 disciples, 12 sons of Israel, all of these 12s, like when you see a 12 in the Bible, you should pay attention. So God is doing something. And so the 12 disciples, Jesus is constituting a new Israel through his disciples is what's being communicated there. So yeah.
I got one more question. We were getting back to the beginning where it talks about the Nazarites. Is that the same as a Nazarene?
Debatable.
I mean, because Jesus was a Nazarene. So
yeah. Well, Jesus was from Nazareth. But
wouldn't that make him a Nazarene? I mean, did your city?
He was called a Nazarene, but he drank wine, so he could not have been a Nazarite.
Okay.
For his ministry, he could have been a Nazarite for a season, but his ministry actually would prohibit him from being a Nazarite. He touched dead bodies, like like he was not concerned about being made unclean. Like those are the things that the Nazarite needed to be concerned about. So I read several commentaries that said Jesus, he was called a Nazarene, but that does not mean he was a Nazarite. But yeah, so Nazareth, like Nazarene is just like a person from Nazareth. So, which is just a town, a small little town, North Israel way.
So your city didn't define you; it was the actual clan you were in. You?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, Jesus was from the tribe of Judah, descendant of David, and so he was a Judahite. He lived in Nazareth, or was raised in Nazareth, from like 12 years on, or somewhere around then. And so, yeah. But
anyone from any tribe in Israel could be a Nazarite if they took a vow.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Man or woman could be a Nazarite. So, which is I think it's super cool. Like there's a lot of conversation in like church leadership circles about like women in ministry in particular. And our tradition in the Assemblies of God, we've always actually affirmed women in ministry, looking at Joel 2 and Pentecost. I will pour out my spirit on your sons and daughters. Like essentially, like God will empower people from both genders to be ministers of his gospel. And people will look at the Old Testament and say the priests were only men, the Levites were only men, so only those people could serve the Lord. But then we have the Nazarite, which is like there are cases of men and women dedicating their lives to serving the Lord in the Old Testament. And so you can't just say the Old Testament has this one pattern. There's another thing that's going on as well. And so they weren't doing the work of the tabernacle. They weren't doing the sacrifices, but they were honoring God. They were serving God in some way as Nazarites. So the Lord made a provision for it. So yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Can you hear my dog snoring?
I can, yeah. It sounds like a baby cooing.
It does.
So, yeah. Oh, dogs. I have to banish Maggie from my office when I'm doing a meeting at home or my second the craft room now, which is because she snores so loud.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you can't be in here, dude. You got to get out of here. So Maggie's my dog, not like a child. So, Maggie. Anyway, I'll stop. All right, we should stop. All right. Well, this coming Sunday is Tim's last Sunday with us. So if you are able to be with us, I would love to have you there and to let's pray for and bless Tim as well. And so, yeah, but it'll be a good week. And the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord turn his face towards you and be gracious to you. The Lord smile upon you and give you peace.
Amen.
God bless.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks,
God
Jason.
bless.
Right.
Bye.